Army gave me the call sign Ghostwalker. Not because I was a spook or anything fancy, just quiet, moved like smoke in the field. Not much of a talker, never was. Grew up in the Appalachians, East Kentucky. My dad cut timber and read the Bible like it was a war manual. My mom, she was gentle. Cancer took her when I was 12. That left Dad, me, and my baby sister Ellie. Ellie was the only softness left in our house after Mom passed. I joined the Army straight out of high school, partly to get away, partly because I felt like I had to fight for something. Didn't know what at the time. Maybe I still don't. I never got married, no kids. Some of the boys in my unit used to razz me about that, but I'd look at the world we were walking into, broken politics, poisoned skies, nukes on standby, and think, why would I bring a baby into this mess? I was on my 5th and final deployment when it happened, stationed in the moss-eaten ruins outside what used to be called Old England. The forest had taken back everything: roads, walls, whole towns. Nature doesn't wait for man to destroy himself. It just fills in the gaps when he's done. The trees out there had grown twisted and tall like green sentinels watching a funeral. And we were the gravediggers. Our outpost was a half-collapsed NATO comm station tucked into a hilltop. Just me, Rowan, and a couple others. Skeleton crew. We had orders to observe and report. But truth was, we were too far out to make any damn difference. Our drones were grounded more than flying. Fuel was rationed like gold, and the world was catching fire without asking our permission. Then one night, it all changed. Rowan cracked into an encrypted news stream. Not supposed to be operational, but that old rust bucket of a laptop lit up like it had something to say. We all crowded around the screen. You know it's serious when soldiers stop eating to watch a broadcast. The headlines were blunt as a hammer. Open quote, Iran and Israel exchange heavy missile fire overnight. Civilian casualties confirmed in Haifa and Tel Aviv. Israeli retaliation strikes Tehran, military and nuclear targets hit. Massive fire at Sharon oil depot, Haifa refinery in flames. U.S., close quote, President Trump issues denial of involvement. World reacts with disbelief. The footage rolled grainy and chaotic. Flames in the streets, children screaming, men in prayer robes clutching rifles, reporters crying as they ducked behind shattered buildings. It was like watching the end of the world on repeat. I remember Rowan standing in the doorway, lit by the glow of the screen. His face was pale, jaw clenched. "This is it," he whispered. "The tipping point." He wasn't wrong. I didn't answer, just stirred the soup I had boiling on a rusted field stove. Tasted like motor oil with chicken fat, but it was warm. Warm was enough. I tried sleeping that night, but the sky wouldn't let me. Across the sea, the night horizon pulsed with light, flashes of orange, white, red. Not thunder, not fireworks, missiles, artillery. Whole cities blinking in and out like broken stars. I could hear Rowan pacing in the hallway, boots tapping like a metronome. We were both thinking the same thing. We weren't just witnesses. We were survivors of a world bleeding to death. So I geared up and went on a solo patrol near Grid 23. That's where the old FOB was, barely a memory now, just broken antennae, rusted shipping containers, and foxholes half swallowed by mud and roots. Fog clung to the ground like the place was trying to forget itself. I had my metal detector slung low. Wasn't scanning for mines. No one's laid new ones out here in years. I was listening. Sometimes old tech picks up strange frequencies. We used to joke about ghost signals, Morse code from another dimension. Most times it was just static. But that night, it was different. A hum, deep and steady, not mechanical. Not human, almost. Alive. I followed it. About 50 meters past the FOB ruins, I found it. Half buried in the dirt, hidden under moss and broken roots. Something glinted. A metallic object, small, shaped like a jagged teardrop, not smooth. Its surface shifted like mercury under a heat lamp. There were glowing lines on it, no language I knew, no symbols I recognized. It pulsed like a heartbeat, and it was warm. Too warm for the cold, wet soil around it. My hand hovered near my sidearm. Not that a 9mm would do much. I radioed in, "Rowan, come in. Found something, non-standard hardware. Possible drone or recon unit. But it's strange. I'll hold position." "Copy, Val. I'm on your 6, ETA 5. I knelt next to it, just watching. The hum grew louder. My ears started ringing. Then something shifted. The ground vibrated. The hum became a scream, like metal tearing through air at the speed of thought. I took a step back, heart pounding. "Rowan, I think it's..." Boom! No time to finish. The light exploded, pure raw white, like staring into the core of a star. Everything inside me turned to fire. The shockwave lifted me off the ground, tossed me like a rag doll. I felt my ribs crack before I even hit the dirt. My eyes were wide open, but all I saw was white. Not snow, just light. Blinding, endless light. I hit the earth hard, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then came the pain. Not the burning kind, the unraveling kind. Like I was being pulled out of myself, like someone had grabbed my soul by the spine and started tearing. Through it all, I heard one last thing. Val! Rowan's voice, far away, distant, like it was coming from the bottom of a lake. I wanted to answer him. I tried, but I couldn't, because I wasn't in my body anymore. Not really. And the forest around me? It was on fire. The blast hadn't just torn through me, it had scorched half the grid. Trees burned, animals scattered. Smoke bled through the branches. The metallic device was gone, vaporized maybe, and me, I was lying still, face down, not breathing. But that's when something stranger than death began, something no military manual could prep me for, something no war story could explain. I wasn't dying, I was leaving. I've seen bodies before, lots, enemy, civilian, friend. You harden to it after a while, but you don't ever think you'll see your own. But there I was, floating above it, looking down like some spook with front row seats to my own damn funeral. I didn't feel pain anymore, not fear, not cold, just quiet. Still, like all the noise had finally shut off. But below me, it was hell. The forest was burning, and not just the dry brush either. Full-grown oaks lit up like paper, black smoke rising fast, curling through the treetops like fingers clawing at heaven. I could see my body crumpled by the blast site, arms twisted, face half gone, skin cooked from the inside out. Smoke poured from my jacket. My dog tags were melted into my chest, and that thing, that alien-looking device, was gone, just a scorched pit in the dirt where it hummed before it screamed. Rowan came crashing through the trees seconds later, coughing, eyes wild, rifle slung and forgotten as he skidded to a stop. "Val!" he screamed, dropping to his knees beside me. "Come on, man. Wake up! Don't you do this!" He tried chest compressions, checked my pulse, tore off his jacket and covered me. Kept talking, cussing like praying, shouting like his voice could drag me back. I wanted to tell him to stop. I wasn't there anymore. I tried moving toward him, but I couldn't. I didn't have legs, or hands, or breath. I wasn't in a body. I was just being, like air with memory, like thought without flesh. And then, something shifted. My vision stretched, beyond the trees, beyond the smoke. I started seeing things I shouldn't have, things miles away. No, countries away, whole continents tearing themselves apart. The earth had cracked open, and no one was looking. They were too busy burning it down. Tel Aviv. Sirens wailed in the night. Anti-missile defenses lit up like fireworks, intercepting warheads midair. But not all of them. One slammed into a residential block, concrete and glass and fire. Families trying to drag loved ones from the rubble, screaming Hebrew prayers into dust-filled skies. Tehran. The skyline was orange and black. Buildings collapsed like sandcastles hit by waves. People ran in every direction, some with babies, some with Bibles, some with blood on their faces. Firestorms rolled through entire districts. It didn't even look like war anymore. It looked like judgment. Haifa. Riots. Gunshots. Flames rolling over synagogues and shopping malls alike. Civilians shot by mistake or on purpose. Didn't matter anymore. Order was gone. All that was left was chaos and screaming. The world was unraveling, and no one could stop it. Not armies, not governments, not prayers. They didn't know how close the edge really was. As I drifted higher, I saw missiles launching, black smoke trails cutting the sky in every direction, satellites falling from orbit, naval fleets locked in range across oceans. The world had gone rabid, every nation snapping at the other like wild dogs, every red line crossed, every bluff called. The earth had caught fire. And it wasn't just the bombs, it was deeper. A sickness, you could feel it, like the whole world's soul was rotting from the inside out. Greed, pride, rage, deception, every sin burning like kerosene-soaked cloth. And the people, they were numb, still tweeting, still streaming, still blind. It hit me then, hard, how asleep we all were, and now that the storm had hit, everyone was too late. Too late to repent, too late to change, too late to stop the chain reaction we'd started years ago. I felt myself rise higher, like something was lifting me. Not a hand, not a force, just a draw, like gravity in reverse. And Rowan, he was still there, kneeling by my body. His voice was hoarse now, cracking, whispering, "Come on, Ghostwalker, come back. Don't leave me here, man, not like this." But I couldn't speak, couldn't blink, couldn't feel, because I was already gone. I hovered there a second longer, just long enough to see the last tear fall from Rowan's cheek onto my burned sleeve. Then the noise faded, the fire, the sirens, the screams, gone. It was like the whole world went mute. Silence wrapped around me like a blanket. A strange silence, not empty, holy, then blackness, but not death. Something else, a waiting, a presence. And that's when I knew something or someone was coming. There ain't no way to explain what happened next without sounding crazy. But then again, death ain't exactly normal, is it? I don't know how long I was drifting. Could have been a second, could have been a century. Time stopped meaning anything. There was no sky, no ground, no direction, just black like I'd been swallowed whole. But I wasn't scared. Not like I thought I'd be. I wasn't falling. I wasn't stuck. I was just waiting. Then it started. Light. At first, faint, like the first crack of dawn after a long frozen night. Then it grew, brighter, warmer, but not blinding. It didn't burn. It wrapped around me, through me. The kind of warmth that digs into your bones and tells you you're not alone anymore. No heat, no cold, no pain, no fear, just peace. I didn't walk into it. I didn't float. I just woke up inside it. This place, wherever I was, it wasn't Earth. It wasn't anything I'd ever seen in any combat zone, dream, or drug-induced haze. There was no battlefield here, no barbed wire, no sirens, no blood, only light that had a presence. It wasn't just shining, it was alive. And then, him. He didn't come marching out of the clouds with a sword or trumpets, didn't float down with golden wings, no stained glass drama. He just was there, standing. Jesus, I knew it was him before he even spoke. There's no mistaking that kind of presence. You feel it before you understand it, like standing in front of a tidal wave that ain't trying to drown you, it's trying to love you. He looked me in the eyes, and I swear I saw everything I ever was in his gaze. Every sin, every scar, every rage-filled moment, every time I turned my back on God, every bullet I'd sent into someone's chest without thinking twice. And yet, I didn't feel judged. I didn't feel condemned. I felt known and loved anyway. I dropped to my knees like my body remembered how to move, even if I didn't have one anymore. I wasn't kneeling from guilt, wasn't even fear. It was like standing in front of the only truth that ever mattered. I couldn't hold myself up, not in front of that kind of peace. He stepped closer. I felt his hands on my shoulders, not rough, not soft, just right. He lifted me like a father picking up a son too broken to stand, and then he spoke. His voice wasn't loud, but it filled the place like thunder wrapped in honey. Warm, solid, not a whisper, not a shout, just truth. Open quote, "You are not dead, Jason, but you have been called." He said my name, my real name. Not Val, not Ghostwalker, not soldier, not killer. Jason. Like he knew the boy I used to be before the war carved something else into me. I tried to speak, couldn't. My throat was dry, even though I didn't have a body. My soul wanted to say 1,000 things. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I wasn't ready, please. But I didn't have to. He already knew. He smiled. It wasn't like any smile I've ever seen. No fake warmth, no polite nod. This was love made real. He helped me to my feet. I stood barefoot, weightless, held together by something stronger than flesh. He looked out toward the edge of the light. I followed his gaze, but it didn't lead to anything, just space. Endless, untouched. Then he said, "There is more you must see. The world does not know what approaches." My stomach twisted, not from fear, from knowing. He wasn't talking about just war. He wasn't talking about politics or bombs or empires. He was talking about what's coming. I didn't even know how to ask what he meant, but I didn't have to. Close quote. Being in his presence, I didn't need explanations. I just knew I had to follow. He turned and began walking, not on ground, not through air, just through. Like the light made a path wherever he stepped. I followed close, like a rookie tagging along behind his CO. No gun, no armor, just my soul laid bare. And as I walked, I realized the closer I got to him, the more the darkness I'd carried started peeling away. Stuff I didn't even know I still had in me. Anger, pride, doubt, that sick feeling in your chest when you think about the men you killed. The guilt you bury so deep, you forget it's even there. It all started breaking off like rust underwater. I don't know how long we walked. Time didn't count here, but I knew this. I wasn't the same man who died back in that burning forest. That man was gone. This This was the beginning of something else. It wasn't a place we walked anymore. There was no sound, no steps to echo, no walls to hit. Just this immense sense of being suspended, like I was staring out of a window that had no edges, no beginning, no end. And then, like flipping a switch, I saw it. Earth. Not the Earth I'd known from a soldier's perspective. No long nights under tarps in foreign deserts, no grim faces around a campfire, no sniper fire from the hills. No, this wasn't about the edge of a battlefield anymore. This was about the whole damn world. Jesus didn't have to say a word. It was like he opened my eyes to something I hadn't been able to see before. I saw cities, big and small, stretching across continents, but they were lost. Not just broken, lost. The streets were filled with people, but they weren't really there. They were numb in their own worlds, wrapped up in their own noise. People distracted by shiny screens, faces buried in the glow of their phones, scrolling, clicking, liking, sharing. A constant stream of updates, whether it was politics, drama, or the latest viral meme. But behind all of it, in the distance, bombs still fell. Whole nations were being torn apart, but people couldn't see it. Their heads were too deep in their feeds, too focused on the fight on Twitter, the next meme, the next headline, the next thing that could make them feel something, and yet they didn't feel anything real. They were too busy fighting a battle they didn't even understand. Open quote. They're awake to war, Jesus said softly, but asleep to truth. The vision shifted again. Now I saw the church. I used to think the church was meant to be a place of refuge, a safe house, a place for truth. But this was a wreck. I saw crowds of people shouting, tearing each other apart over doctrine. Some were praying for political victories, while others prayed for prosperity. Some were wrapped in golden robes, preaching luxury and comfort, distant from the struggles of the people they claimed to serve. Pastors were on stage talking about how blessed they were, how rich they were, how much more they could get, all while the real, hungry, broken people outside those church walls went unnoticed. Faith had turned into a hashtag, something people wore like a badge on their sleeve, but didn't live. Religion had become a product, a brand, something you could sell. Even the message of Jesus, it was twisted. Too many had taken his words and rewrapped them, selling a different kind of hope, a shallow one, a prosperity gospel, where your faith equaled a bigger house, better car, and a fatter paycheck. But I saw the hunger in the eyes of those still outside the gates, and the wealth sitting like a fortress behind those gleaming walls of glass. This is not what I came for, Jesus whispered, his voice carrying the weight of everything. I couldn't look away, and then I saw something that nearly broke me. I was back in Israel, but this wasn't a holy land. This wasn't a place of peace. It was shattered, close quote. The people there, once chosen to be an example, had lost their way. People with guns were praying, but not for peace. They were praying for victory, praying for destruction. Their prayers were laced with hatred, prayers for the enemy to fall, not prayers for reconciliation, not prayers for God's grace. And the same was happening in Iran. It wasn't the religion anymore. It was the rage, the bloodlust, and it was everywhere. Faith had been hijacked by a firestorm of pride, greed, and anger. A fire that burned so hot it consumed everything in its path, including truth. Open quote. Even here, they have missed the point. Faith has become a weapon. My name is on their lips, but their hearts are full of wrath, Jesus said, his eyes darkening, but not with anger, with sorrow. And it wasn't just in the Middle East. No, this was bigger. This spread across the world. I saw the streets of cities in Africa where children lay starving while the world's wealthiest nations poured billions into arms and revenge. Men were lining up to fight wars they didn't understand while families struggled to survive the aftermath of those wars. Broken homes, broken nations, broken lives. All over the world, leaders made decisions in boardrooms while innocent people died in dirt-poor villages. And the church? They stood in the middle of it all, silent, divided, arguing over which doctrine was right, which version of the Bible mattered, but ignoring the fact that children were starving, dividing their pews between the rich and the poor, watching as the world burned, but only concerned about how much they could gather for themselves. My stomach churned. Jesus didn't have to show me all of it, but he did. And I saw clearly what had gone wrong. We had built a world where we worshiped comfort and pride, where we'd use the name of God to justify hate, where we couldn't tell the difference between righteous anger and prideful vengeance. And it wasn't just the politicians, the soldiers, or the terrorists. It was all of us. People didn't understand that the enemy wasn't just out there. The enemy was in here, in our hearts, in the lies we told ourselves, in the anger we fed, in the distractions we couldn't escape. The enemy has numbed them with noise, Jesus said. They rage, but they do not repent. Repent. It hit me like a punch in the chest. We weren't just waiting for the bombs to stop. We weren't just waiting for the next war to end. We were waiting for something bigger, a great reckoning, a reckoning for everything we'd ignored, for every time we traded peace for pride, for every time we ignored love in the name of victory. And we were running out of time. I don't know how long I stood there, but I felt the shift before I even saw it. Everything I'd been shown up until that point, the wars, the hatred, the division, was just a setup. It was like watching the tension building in a gunfight before the first shot rang out. But this was different. There was silence first, not the kind you get after the storm passes, not the kind of quiet when the fire dies down and the wind picks up. No. This was a silence so thick you could feel it in your bones, a heavy kind of quiet. Then it came. A sound. It wasn't like any trumpet I'd ever heard. It wasn't the blare of a horn, the sound of something that could be used to rally troops. This was something deeper. It was like the whole universe heard it at once, like the earth itself held its breath. And just like that, the world started to tear apart. People began to vanish. Gone. No warning. No goodbye. Just a snap. I saw mothers screaming as their children disappeared right in front of their eyes. I saw fathers reaching out for their families only to grasp empty air. It was like the world had been jolted, yanked out of place. Cars swerved off the road, the streets flooded with chaos, close quote. Drivers who had their hands on the wheel 1 second, now gone, leaving the cars to crash into each other. Planes in the sky began to fall, spiraling out of control, screaming as they crashed down into the earth. A whole world lost its direction in the blink of an eye. In the Middle East, I saw soldiers, the ones who had lived their whole lives fighting, the ones who had pulled the trigger without ever questioning why, dropped their weapons. They didn't even have time to understand what was happening. 1 second, they were looking at the enemy across the line, and the next second, nothing. They just looked up, staring at the sky like they were waiting for something to explain it all. Rowan. The name hit me like a freight train. Rowan. I saw him sitting in his apartment, alone. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot, his hands shaking as he frantically scrolled through his phone, checking the news, checking messages, looking for answers that weren't coming. Outside, the world was in flames, explosions lighting up the skyline, shaking the windows, but Rowan just sat there staring at the screen. He was alone, just like I had been all those years in the service, wrapped in my own fears and doubts, thinking I could handle it all. Now, the world was literally crumbling around him, and there was nothing anyone could do. He didn't know where to turn. He didn't know what to believe, and neither did I. I watched as the world continued to fall apart. There was no place left untouched, but then everything darkened. The light that had been wrapping around me, that had been shining so brightly in the presence of Jesus, began to fade. The vision twisted into something darker, more terrifying. I saw a new order rising from the ashes of everything that had been destroyed. But it wasn't the kind of order you'd want. It was the kind of order that silenced truth. I saw people rallying behind a leader, a figure who promised peace, who promised an end to the chaos. He spoke of bringing the world together, of creating a world where all the divisions would disappear. People followed him without question, swept up in his promises. They believed every word he spoke because it was what they wanted to hear. No more war, no more hate, no more division. But the peace he promised wasn't real, not the way we'd always imagined it. It wasn't about healing, it wasn't about truth. It was a false peace, a peace built on lies and silenced voices. I saw prophets, real prophets, hunted down. People who had tried to warn the world about what was coming, who had spoken truth in a time when no one was listening. The world had stopped caring about truth. They had stopped caring about God. They only cared about comfort. I saw churches burned to the ground, not by some radical group, but by the people themselves, the very ones who had once worshipped in them. They had turned their backs on everything that mattered, chasing the promise of a false utopia. A utopia where God was erased, where truth no longer had a voice. Open quote. They begged for a second chance, Jesus said, his voice distant now, like the echo of a voice that had been calling for too long and had finally been ignored. But there would be no second chance. Not for them, not for this world. I saw faces full of terror, people screaming out for help, begging for mercy, begging for just one more chance to turn things around. But mercy, it was already gone. They had traded it for false promises and empty words. I don't know how long the vision lasted. I don't know if it was minutes or hours, but it felt like eternity. And as I watched the world tear itself apart, I couldn't help but feel the weight of it all. I had been shown the truth, the reality of where we were headed. We were running out of time, and there was no going back. Close quote. I didn't know what I expected to feel after everything I'd witnessed. The wars, the suffering, the devastation, the burning churches, the silence after the trumpet call. It felt like I was standing on the edge of something too vast to comprehend, something that threatened to pull me apart. But then, he looked at me. Jesus didn't speak at first. He just looked into my soul. There's no way to describe it. It wasn't like when a guy on the battlefield locks eyes with you and you know you've got each other's back, or when your commander gives you that look that says everything you need to hear in one brief glance. This was different. It was penetrating. It was like he could see every part of me, the parts I was proud of, the parts I buried deep, the parts I didn't even know existed. He didn't need to say a word. His eyes were full of knowing, full of love, full of urgency. I could feel it in my chest, like a heavy weight I couldn't shake. Then he spoke, and his voice was like thunder. "There is still time, but not much," he said. "Go back. Tell them I am coming soon. Not as a whisper, but as a king. Let no one be found sleeping." I was frozen. My mouth went dry. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into a chasm of darkness, unsure if I had the courage to jump. The words he spoke hit me like a hammer to the gut. I had seen the destruction. I had seen the chaos. I had seen the world unravel. But the weight of that statement? It was the end game, the final call. I had been shown the truth. The way the world had spun out of control, the way people had become so numb that they didn't even recognize the reality they were living in anymore. And yet, here he was telling me to go back, to warn them, to tell them that the time was running out. But I couldn't help but ask the question that burned in my throat. How will they believe me? I stammered, the words barely escaping my lips. How will they believe me? I'm just a soldier. I've seen the worst of humanity. I've been part of it, for God's sake. Who would listen to me? I wanted to say more, wanted to argue, to ask how I, of all people, was supposed to be the one to carry this message. I had never been a preacher. Hell, I'd barely ever been a man of faith. How could I be the one to deliver something this important? Jesus didn't get angry. He didn't look at me with disappointment or judgment. He just nodded, his expression soft but resolute. "You must be my voice," he said, his tone steady, unshaken. "Some will laugh, others will listen. But every soul warned is a soul I might save." I didn't understand it all. I couldn't wrap my mind around it, but something inside me stirred, something deep. A part of me that had been buried under years of trauma, fear, anger, and regret. A part of me that had wanted to run for so long. A part of me that had shut down when the bullets started flying, when the chaos took over. That part of me, the soldier who just survived, was waking up now. I wasn't being asked to be perfect. I wasn't being asked to have all the answers. I was being asked to be obedient, to deliver a message, no matter the cost. I had seen the consequences of ignoring the truth. I had seen the devastation that came from turning a blind eye. I had seen the masses marching down the path of destruction because they were too distracted, too comfortable, too proud to see what was really happening. This was bigger than me. Bigger than any of us. Jesus' eyes didn't leave mine. He didn't need to say anything more. It was like he had already spoken the words I needed to hear. The rest was up to me. But before I could fully process it, the world around me shuddered. I felt the air change. The ground beneath my feet trembled. The light that had been surrounding us flickered, dimming as the atmosphere grew thick. And then I heard it. The trumpet. Louder. Closer this time. I had heard it once before. the sound that seemed to shake the very fabric of existence. But this time, it was different. This time, it wasn't just a warning. It was urgent, inescapable. I saw the vision again, but this time it was more vivid, more real, more imminent. The world had already begun to tear apart. People were vanishing, cities were falling, but this time, there was no escaping the realization. It was here. The end wasn't something in the future anymore. It was now. It was coming, the final hour. Jesus' voice was calm, but the weight of his words hit harder than any explosion I had ever been in the middle of. It is not too late for them, but it will be soon. Oh, go, tell them. And with that, the world shook again, the earth splitting, the sky darkening. Everything around me felt like it was crumbling, like time itself was running out. I didn't know how much longer I could stay there, but I knew what I had to do. I didn't know the details. I didn't know how it would all unfold, but I had been called. The vision started to blur, everything spinning, everything pulling away. And as the last of the light faded and the trumpet echoed again, I felt myself being pulled back to reality, back to the world I had left behind. I don't know how long it took me to come to, but when I did, it felt like someone had thrown a brick in my chest, a sharp, cold breath, and the feeling of fire on my skin. I didn't understand what was happening at first. For a moment, I thought I was still in the vision, still floating somewhere between life and death, still trapped in that moment of reckoning, listening to the final words of Jesus. Then the smell hit me. It was the sharp, metallic scent of something burned, something charred. I blinked, and for the first time in what felt like forever, my eyes were open. I was in the back of a military transport, on the hard, uncomfortable floor. The kind of floor that scraped at your skin even when you weren't bleeding. The sounds around me were muffled. Voices, confusion, beeping machines, the hum of engines. But they cut through the fog in my mind like an old radio crackling back to life. A medic's face appeared over me, his eyes wide with shock. "He's alive!" he shouted. The urgency in his voice didn't match the disbelief in his eyes. I didn't know what was worse, that I could hear him or that I had no idea why I was hearing him. A groan escaped my throat. My body was aching, my bones sore, like I'd been dragged through hell and back. Then it hit me, the memory of the explosion, the pain, the moment when I was ripped apart by that blast. The last thought I had before everything went dark was the image of that strange device in the dirt. And then, nothing. But here I was, alive. I shouldn't have been. I had been dead. Rowan burst into the compartment, eyes wide, his breath catching when he saw me. His face was pale, his jaw slack. He took one step toward me, then another, then stopped short as if my very presence had shattered his understanding of the world. "Val," he whispered. "Val, what the hell happened?" His voice was thick, like he didn't even know if he was talking to a ghost. I opened my mouth, but for a second, no words came. The visions, the message from Jesus, they were still so real. It was like a fire burning behind my eyes, and it wasn't going out. I tried to sit up, but the pain was unreal. Every inch of me screamed in protest, but I fought through it, clenching my teeth, forcing myself to sit. I had to tell him. I had to tell them. They're coming, Rowan, I said, my voice ragged and hoarse. The world is ending. I saw it. I saw everything. I could barely form the words. My chest was still trying to catch up with the fact that I was breathing. But I had to get it out. Rowan just stared at me, like I'd grown a second head. He blinked, then blinked again. There was no recognition in his face. No relief. Just confusion. "You really think the rapture is coming?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, like the words didn't even belong to him. I could hear the skepticism in his tone, but underneath that, I could also hear a hint of fear. A fear that he hadn't fully understood until now. "I don't think, Rowan." I managed to get the words out. "I know." My voice grew stronger with each word, like it was shaking off the weight of the vision. "It's closer than anyone realizes. I've seen it. I've seen it." His mouth went dry. He didn't say anything for a long time. It felt like an eternity, just sitting there in the silence between us, like he was trying to decide whether to believe me or call it all just a bad dream. I don't know what he thought of me in that moment. Maybe he thought I was crazy. Maybe he thought the blast had knocked something loose in my head. But what I saw, I knew it was real. I had felt it. The vision hadn't just shown me the world on the brink, it showed me the urgency of it, the immediacy. Every day I waited, every day I hesitated, meant another soul that would be lost, another chance for redemption that would slip through our fingers, and I couldn't let that happen. Weeks later, I walked out of the army. I couldn't explain it at first, couldn't find the words to describe the moment I made the decision. But in my gut, I knew it was time. Time to put down the weapon, stop fighting the battles that didn't matter, and focus on the one that would. The truth was heavy. The weight of what I had seen, what I had felt, was like carrying a 100-pound pack, but it wasn't a burden anymore. It was my mission. I had to go. I had to spread the message. I had to tell the world what I had seen before it was too late. Some listened when I started speaking, some didn't. Some laughed, some scoffed. Some even tried to push me back into the shadows, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I went from church to church, shelter to shelter, school to school, anywhere people would listen. I spoke to anyone who would hear me, from the soldiers still in uniform to the families hiding in basements. I even stood outside the ruins of war-torn cities, holding up a sign that said, "He is coming, wake up." It wasn't easy. The world didn't want to hear it. It didn't want to believe it. But I knew what I saw. I knew who had called me to do this. There were times when I was laughed at, mocked, and called crazy. But there were also times when I saw tears in people's eyes, heard them whisper that they needed to hear this. Some didn't understand it, some didn't want to believe it. But it didn't matter. I didn't stop. I couldn't, because the time was running out. The days grew darker, and I knew that every soul I reached, every person I touched with the message of what was coming, it mattered. The world had grown numb, distracted by everything except the truth. And I was the one chosen to carry that truth, to wake people up, no matter how hard it was, no matter how alone I felt sometimes. I had seen the warning. I had been given the message, and I couldn't let it die with me. I didn't know how much time I had left. But I knew this. There was no more time to waste.